let's keep going with with that fruit. Does that sound good? Okay. So let me pull up this picture right here because I know that this is on everybody's minds. And if you have fruit trees, you may be seeing something like this. It's important. And go.
Yep, there we go. Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button there. Yeah, so this is a picture of an apple tree here. And so the question was, what do you think this is? You know, they moved into this location and had an apple tree. They're not sure what the cultivar is, but this is their first year for it. And this is the absolute perfect time for cedar apple rust to be starting to show itself, right? So this appears, very commonly. It's called cedar apple rust. And it's got a pretty unique life cycle where it requires a juniper species like a eastern red cedar and an apple as its main host to continue its life cycle. And so, of course, like Greg always says, we always recommend certain cultivars, but of course, this person doesn't know which cultivar, but some of those cultivars we might talk about that might have resistance to this might be like Arkansas Black, Liberty, maybe even Empire. Some of those that we might think of that can maybe keep away from having cedar apple rust as much. Of course, we can always say like remove your eastern red cedars, but that's not really practical, especially how the spores can move, miles across the landscape to find their next host. So that's never a practical aspect there. But if production is the main goal and getting a maximum amount of apples production wise here, we've got to consider a preventative fungicide spray. So of course, we would probably have wanted to spray this at the pink bud break stage here earlier in the season to prevent this to come on, but we can consider a secondary cover spray at this point to prevent it from continuing its life cycle. And that product is going to be called Immunox, IMMUNOX. Immunox, and that's the best way to be applying that at the pink bud stage, and then a secondary cover spray in a few weeks after that. So Greg, you're the apple guy here, you're the fruit expert here. I know you've seen cedar apple rust. Anything else you want to throw in there?
I just got to get on it early. Once it's to this point, then you're way behind and really not going to get much control on it. You might kind of temper it this year, but that's one of those you start early in the season. And if you check out, and I think Natalie put it in the chat box there, that home fruit spray schedule tells you that most all those fungal diseases, you got to get started on them earlier, and we'll maintain cover sprays, but the actual control starts early in the season, not these later cover sprays.
Actually, the link that I put in the chat box, I'll put in the disease and insect control. But what I put in there was a pretty new publication that we have on selecting apple and pear cultivars. And so what I thought Greg was going to say was choose cultivars that had some resistance to cedar apple rust. And we do have a few. Now, this is not everything, right? But we have an increasingly large array of cultivars actually coming out of the Midwestern breeding program that have some resistance. So that is in that list. And then I will also go ahead and put in, oh
yeah, got it.
Seth already did. Yeah.
And if y'all want to nerd out even more, the galls that you see on the eastern red cedars that are produced from this are just unworldly. They look like an alien orange goo sap coming off that eastern red cedar, and pretty cool life cycle to think about. Sorry, I want to nerd out on that a little bit.
Well, and another point, it requires both those hosts. So if you don't want to have it, then you've got to eliminate one of those hosts. If you're not willing to spray, if you're not willing to choose those cultivars that are resistant, there's no way that you can eliminate all the cedar trees that would be in a potential like wind blow area for these spores to move around. And also I want to compliment the person who took this picture. It was an excellent photograph, very clear, and it had all these different stages on the leaf. You can see where the spots are just starting. You see that larger one right there by the mid vein. You can even see the spores, those little teeny tiny black dots there. And then some of the spots where they're more progressed in age, those darker spots are kind of sunken in. Just wanted to compliment that picture taker. What an excellent photo.
And he was
that's
a new resident that moved in from Colorado into East Tennessee.
Yeah.
So
Welcome to human diseases.
exactly. And yeah, Celeste is right. In that picture, you can see just the cupping. They call it cupping, where the lesions will start to develop a cupping phase of the spore right there, which is pretty cool to think about. But yeah, absolutely. We love good pictures sent in for our team.
I want to say one last thing on that. So homeowners, like she said, those spores are going to travel miles. And so you may remove all the cedars around your house or within sight, but those spores can be windblown for miles, which leads to a second point. Understand there will be a level of pressure. If you're growing fruits, vegetables, landscape plants, there is going to be some insect and or disease pressure on all of them. You will never get rid of everything. So learn to live with, unless you just completely get rid of your vegetables and fruit crop and just don't do it. But we mentioned the economic threshold. So there's going to be a point that you're going to live with, and then up to that using some management of control. But even with control, you'll still have that disease crop its head up. Remember that disease triangle in terms of controlling those pest diseases. And have some patience and tolerance, because you're not going to have that sterile environment. You may want it to be that way, but that's simply not going to be the case.
All right, good conversation. Okay, so we're going to wrap fruits up with this last picture. Let me go ahead and do screen share on that. And I'm going to let y'all take us in the direction that we need to go for this. So this looks a little confusing. I know the picture is kind of small. I couldn't get it blown up anymore, but there's some oozing happening down here for those who can't really like zoom in on that right there. So what's that all about, friends?
Probably one of the most common diseases that we see in peaches is going to be brown rot. There's going to be several of those diseases that happen as those fruits start to ripen and get near the ripening stage. And the fungicide spray programs on those are going to be critical in that late period, and actually just harvest and management around those peaches. Our wet environments here and just our climate in general can be very conducive to those. And brown rot and some of the stone rots in peaches are just very, very, very common type problems. And peach, there's a reason why we tell homeowners of all of our fruit crops, peach is at the top pinnacle of those in terms of trying to manage insect pests, boring insects, and or some of these post-harvest. So peaches are almost like the tomato crop, except they're a lot bigger and a lot harder to kind of spray and keep managed, and the cultural practices on those. I would tell you, if you're growing peaches, follow the spray schedule. As a homeowner, I'd probably tell you only plant one peach to reduce the host pressures, and then try and follow a spray schedule for controlling those peaches.
I remember one of the first spring field day type events I went to in Tennessee. It was a May event, like, years ago when I first got here. And every other person that I saw that day was like, the peaches are dropping off my peach tree. What's going on? And so I'll say this, and Seth may want to jump in too. We can't really see on that image, but what I would want to know is, is there a shape to that spot where there was oozing? And if it's crescent shaped, what do we think? So,
oh yeah, crescent shaped plum curculio, number one insect that's going to start that moon crescent shape feeding pattern where they just drill their sucking mouth part into that that fruit there. And yeah, that's just another one of those spray schedules we got to keep on top of. And it's actually, excuse me, going to lay its egg inside of that stone fruit as well. So sprays to prevent that and hopefully prevent oviposition inside that fruit. I did also want to mention, sanitation, so overwintering of these insects, the overwintering of these fungal spores as well. When those peaches are dropping, we're not just leaving them on the orchard floor. We're gonna clean that up as best we can and prevent any of those mummies from overwintering from year to year. So sanitation on the orchard floor is gonna be a number one there too. And even just preventing, leaf wetness over time and remembering that stone fruits need that open center pruning. And so most likely when brown rot and we get to this stages where we're starting to see oozing on the branch cankers and whatnot, it's probably been a neglected fruit tree. And we need to think about stone fruits need annual pruning, if not thinning. So just something to think about on that. And sorry to get off track from a Pumpcrochelio, but wanted to hit that too.
All right.
Yeah, I like how Greg compared it to the tomatoes of the fruit world because there are just so many pest and insect disease and insect problems on those. And unlike tomatoes, we can't do crop rotation with our fruit trees. But we can do pesticide rotation. So we talk about pesticide applications a lot on these and just making sure that we're remembering about rotating our pesticide use and not using the same pesticides over and over again so we don't develop resistance in these insect pests and disease pests.
Yep.
And Taylor, that's why I said probably for a homeowner, grow one tree. Don't have a bunch of host plants out there too. That's just that many more hosts that can host those insect and disease pests. Find you a full sun, do great cultural management, and peach is one that from an organic standpoint, you're really going to be challenged. You may be successful for a few years, but once disease or insect pressures kind of find that plant, then controlling those will be really, really, really challenging from a organic standpoint.
All right. Well, y'all did a great job. And I just knew that we would finally run into an office hours month where we were overrun with fruit and veggie questions. And this was the month. And it makes sense, right? We've all been out there getting our gardens planted. Things are starting to grow. And this is when we start seeing issues, insect issues, disease issues. As we go along, I'm sure we will get some more disease and insect questions as well as, weed control. The grasses tend to get a little crazy later in the season when we get tired of hoeing. So keep sending in those questions as we go throughout our vegetable gardening season. And when we come back in July, we are happy to spend as much time as we need to addressing home food production for sure.